Welcome to Superhero Rundown. I'm Crimson, and today we'll be looking at the egotistical, megalomaniacal villain of the MCU. You all know him, Tony Stark. Don't at me. Tony is a cautionary tale of technology and paranoia. In the redemption at the end of Endgame, that doesn't really count, as he created a lot of the issues that the MCU as a whole faces. He made a super robot that went off the rails and tried to destroy humanity. He made another super robot to fight the first one, and Thanos was trouncing around in his head for about 8 years before they finally met. If you make enough superbots, one has to be good eventually, right? Tony could have worked with Cap on some of these issues. Tony acts like a child when Cap tells him he knew about Bucky murdering Tony's parents. I covered this in the Captain America episode. He is part of the reason Cap doesn't sign the Accords because he put Wanda under house arrest without telling Cap. Cap goes on the run and rescues his friends because Tony helped Ross put him on the wrong side of the law. And when they finally see each other after so many years, Tony blames him for his failures rather than face the consequences like an adult. He doesn't understand that he's a danger to those around him, not just his super friends, but his civilian friends too. Happy straight up gets injured during Iron Man 3, and Pepper gets injected with Extremis in the same movie. He's arrogant and a bit too reliant on technology to the point where it hurts him and ends up killing him. But let's start with the bare essentials. Tony is the ultimate capitalist, using his money to fight terrorism in the form of privatized world security, the Iron Man armor. And to argue this point, the first Iron Man movie ends with Tony holding a press conference to explain what happened in the climax of the film and launching the entirety of the MCU.
I am Iron Man.
Yay, capitalism, yay. Small celebration. It's not really, though. Capitalism is fucking terrible, and if you live in it, if you like it, it's only because you're well off. Again, don't at me. The thing with Tony and the Iron Man movies is that they are built for Republicans and the right to take joy in. That there's a lone actor who will act on their own and do good. And that's great, because sometimes there are people like that. Not billionaires, but there are people who do that. Why are the Iron Man movies more Republican? Because
you want my property, you can't have it. But I did you a big favor. I have successfully privatized world peace.
Tony is a capitalist. He's not always right, but he wants to spend all his money trying to protect himself, his family, and his friends. Privatizing is a Republican value. It's why my dad likes Iron Man more than Captain America. I'm obviously Team Cap. Where have you been? And even though he renews his agenda to go from weapons to energy, he doesn't swear off weapons altogether. The Iron Man armor suits are weapons. In Time to Work for a Living, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the Organized Superhero by Adrian, we're told what Stark actually does. But Stark responds not by swearing off weapons altogether, even when Stane reverse engineers a more powerful version of the Iron Man suit. Instead, after wresting control of his company from Stane, Stark limits Stark Industries' weapons manufacturing to his own Iron Man program to ensure that his weapons are wielded only by patriotic and principled individuals, with the added side benefit of providing his now pacifist company with a weaponized mascot in the Iron Man suit. Tony has started to put himself back on the map with clean energy by the beginning of the Avengers. When he gets invited to the helicarrier after Loki stops by with his glow stick of destiny, he has Jarvis steal S.H.I.E.L.D. secrets, preferring to find out what S.H.I.E.L.D's hiding instead of, being trustworthy. In Iron Man 2, after he's told the government to shove it, it's revealed that his current arc reactor is not working properly and that the core keeps burning out. Fury comes to see Stark and gives him his father's files to work out the new element that his father left behind. His father even tells him via film that he's bound by the technology of his time. Fury leaves Coulson in charge of Tony for 2 reasons. Tony needs to find the new element, and Tony also needs zero distractions. While he works on the new element, Coulson keeps an eye on him with little trouble, but is then reassigned to New Mexico, for Thor reasons. In an act of kindness, after spending time with Coulson, Tony actually offers to fly Coulson to Portland to see his girlfriend. He forms a personable connection to Coulson, So when Loki kills him, he's really pissed off and snaps at Cap afterwards, saying they are not soldiers. Iron Man, for example, reacts uncharacteristically emotionally to the death of Agent Coulson, and Captain America doubts authority and searches around the SHIELD complex for hidden weaponry. These moments pave the way for each character to realize that he must temper his more hard-line ideological beliefs to work alongside the other. Tony fights alongside the other Avengers, but when they all become outnumbered by the alien invaders, the corrupt leaders of S.H.I.E.L.D. launch a nuclear missile at the Isle of Manhattan, even though Fury tells them not to. Tony, after learning that the missile is headed for them, decides to put the missile in the portal to destroy the aliens, and is willing to do it, even though Cap tells him it's a one-way trip through and he's probably not coming back. Tony manages to do both, slide the missile to destroy the aliens and make it back to Earth by going back through. Through sheer dumb luck. In Time to Work for a Living, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the Organized Superhero, Aku explains that it was impossible not to end the movie without the nuclear weapon to show Tony's heroics. With their response team suppressed, S.H.I.E.L.D. orders a nuclear strike on New York that Iron Man diverts and uses to destroy the aliens' control ship, darkly linking America's superpower status with its superheroes. Though the audience is clearly meant to see Stark's actions as heroic, a selfish, hedonist billionaire with everything to live for, choosing to die for his team, city, and world, it is impossible to imagine how the movie would have resolved itself without the nuclear weapon. Without not only the organization's coldly calculated contribution, but its intent. Stark does save the world as an individual by making an individual sacrifice, but only by instrumentalizing himself and fulfilling his organization's directives better than they had planned, by serving as a sleeker and more accurate S.H.I.E.L.D. bomber. Here's where we actually start to see Tony messing everything up, and it starts in Iron Man 3 with Happy getting injured. It's quite obvious that Tony suffers from PTSD due to being in the cave in Iron Man, but it gets worse as he deals with the fallout of the battle for New York. He has nightmares and copes with it by building more armor. The cool thing with Iron Man 3 is the fight with Killian, the villain. Tony takes out his frustrations and keeps switching suits. It's not only a super cool sequence to watch, but a fitting allegory for him to work through his PTSD as he changes suits. After the battle, he destroys all the suits for Pepper, his girlfriend, to prove he doesn't need them. And you would think that Tony would have learned his lesson after all that, but nope. Ultron is the thing he did wrong. Yup, it's his fault. Super Robot, Tony's fault. I mean, Bruce kind of helped and he was there, but that's not the point, and he's not actually in this part of the episode because nobody talked about him during Avengers Endgame anyway. Or Infinity War. I mean, let's be real. Bruce was an afterthought in both of those movies. Tony has created an Iron Legion for the Avengers to help with civilian evacuation when they are out in the field. Tony finds the scepter that Loki had in the Avengers movie, but the Scarlet Witch, one of Hydra's experiments, interferes. She shows him the Avengers destroyed in battle, which fuels his paranoia. In Tony's nightmare, Cap asks why he didn't do more. So in light of this revelation, Tony convinces Bruce to apply the stone from the scepter to the Ultron program, his solution to the Avengers, because he wants to leave the suits behind, just like he promised Pepper. He wants a suit of armor around the world to protect the planet and doesn't want to debate it with the team, because they only have 3 days before Thor takes the scepter with the stone back to Asgard. They create Ultron, although they don't know it's malfunctioning yet. Ultron confronts the Avengers. In How the MCU Built to Tony Stark's Final Avengers Endgame Moment by Kyle Kazoo, we are told that Tony has this frame of mind. In an attempt to create a suit of armor around the world, Tony accidentally gives birth to Ultron. And birth is the truth of it, as Ultron lashes out almost like a bratty son. In response, the rest of the Avengers chastise Tony for his arrogance, and they're right. Tony's intentions are good, but because he can't rest, he can't see his mistakes. Instead, he works tirelessly with one thing in mind. If he does nothing, the endgame will come. If he does nothing, it's his fault. Tony tells Fury that the whole point is to win. to stop avenging so they can go home. Fury confronts Tony on his superbot Ultron. Tony tells him in his vision that he saw everyone dead. The world ended. Fury thinks he was tricked, but Tony says he was shown. The Avengers have just their will and their wit to save the world. Which is all Tony needs sometimes, so he convinces Bruce to build another superbot, because that worked out so well the first time. It worked out terribly. The Superbots fight, and Vision, the good Superbot, helps the Avengers overcome Ultron. Civil War is where we get a bit of backstory for Tony. Not just what we've seen, but more of his parents, who were, spoiler alert, killed by eyeliner assassin Bromance Boy. The movie shows that while he no longer obsesses over the suits, he still craves that celebrity, which is shown when Tony shows off his new technology to help with trauma at MIT. Tony, after being confronted by a mother who lost her son in Sokovia, brings Thunderbolt Ross to the Avengers compound. Ross thinks that even though the world owes the Avengers, they should be reined in, that they need a committee to handle them, especially after Sokovia and Lagos. I can see Tony's point of view. He wants a life that's free of alien and international threats. He explains that he never stopped with the suits, and he doesn't want to lose Pepper because of his suits, so the Accords will split the difference. Steve still refuses to sign the documents. Tony almost has Steve convinced to sign, but lets it slip that they have Wanda imprisoned against her will and aren't giving her a chance to sign the Accords. Steve gets pissed off at not letting her decide for herself, so he decides not to sign. Period. This leads us into Civil War and shows us Tony's new obsession. Fascism! And if you remember from my channel intro, we do not stand fascism here. Ross tells Tony to bring in Steve, Bucky, and Falcon. So, Tony goes to Queens to coerce Peter Parker to join his side. Tony invades Peter's personal space and finds his suit. He offers to give Peter a new suit and the chance to be something greater. Tony identifies with making the world a better place, but obviously nothing else. He threatens to tell Aunt May via blackmail about Spider-Man, and Peter agrees to go with him. Which, again, not okay. You don't blackmail a 17-year-old just to do your bidding. And as I explained in the Cap episode, he tries to kill Bucky because he killed Tony's mom while he was brainwashed. I mean, Tony knows how the Winter Soldier works, so why the hell is he being so childish? By the end of Civil War, Tony has lost a lot. Half his friends, Rhodey's legs, his reputation, his chance at revenge, and his pride. Tony receives a letter from Cap because Cap is an adult, as well as a burner phone if he needs to contact him. Then we see him again in Spider-Man Homecoming. Here's the gist. Happy is put in charge of the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and whenever Peter tries to tell him something, the 17-year-old is ignored because fuck listening to kids, I guess. I understand that Peter is just starting out, but you don't have to call him whenever he leaves a place. And Tony ordering that and then basically leaving Happy with all of that is not okay. I know Tony's dad did that to him with Jarvis, but Tony needs to be better than that. Homecoming does have a super poignant moment for Tony. He confronts Peter. He tells him he listened to Peter, and Peter looks surprised to see Tony. Tony explains if Peter had died, it would be on Tony. He also explains that he wants Peter to be better than he was. He demands the suit back, and Peter says he's nothing without the suit. Tony explains if he's nothing without the suit, then he's nothing with the suit and he can't have it, which is honestly one of his better courses of action. Holy shit, he actually did learn something from Pepper. Anyway, once the villain Vulture is defeated, Peter is given the choice. Become an Avenger or don't. He chooses to be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and turns Tony down, which honestly, good for Parker. Then we get to Infinity War and Endgame. Tony, Peter, and Doctor Strange end up on Thanos' ship in space. Spider-Man explains why he's there and places blame on Tony. Which is actually hilarious and totally true. Tony tries to scold him, but Peter retorts that if there's no neighborhood to protect, then what's the point of being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man? Tony tells Strange that Thanos has been in his head for 6 years since New York, and now he's back. On Titan, Iron Man goes toe-to-toe with Thanos and manages to get a single drop of blood from him. Which Thanos is a little impressed with, and honestly, so am I. Thanos wipes the floor with Tony, and honestly, when I first watched this, I thought Tony was going to die when he got stabbed. It was that gut-wrenching, in a very good fight. Thanos respects Stark, which is creepy. Strange steps in and tells him he can have the Time Stone if Thanos spares Tony. Thanos agrees, gets the Time Stone, and goes to Earth to kill Vision. Tony is told by Strange that this was the only way to win before being wiped from existence. The only two left are Nebula and Tony. Tony watches as Peter disappears and feels responsible, which he is, but it's still heart-wrenching because Peter's so young. In the End, MCU was a saga about failure, Rafael Motomayor explains. If it wasn't for Strange giving away the Time Stone, Tony Stark would have most likely died in Infinity War. Thanos would have probably still managed to kill Strange and take the stone. The difference would be that without Tony, the Avengers could never figure out time travel, nor would have Tony be able to sacrifice himself to save the Earth from Thanos. It was through failure that they managed to be successful and fulfill the promise they made all those years ago. If we can't protect the Earth, you can be damn well sure we'll avenge it. In Endgame, Tony has a daughter and lives in the woods like a weirdo with Pepper and Morgan. Morgan has Tony wrapped around her little finger. He takes excellent care of his daughter and adores her. No wonder he doesn't want to mess it up. The remaining Avengers try to get his help with the time heist, but he flat out refuses to help, then figures it out on his own. Pepper and Tony discuss what's going on with the time travel. They talk about him stopping, and Pepper tells him that trying to stop him is a failure of hers. She feels terrible about it, but asks if he could rest. After they mess all the way up and let Loki escape in 2012, Tony and Steve go to New Jersey in 1970 to an army base. Tony goes to retrieve the Tesseract and runs into Howard Stark, his father, deceased, formerly and futurely. Tony is overcome with emotion at seeing his dad again. They talk about their kids. Howard doesn't want a kid to turn out like him, and Tony's surprised. He learns his father did actually care about him. They get the stones and build a gauntlet for it. Thanos comes back from the past because the evil Nebula was the one who came back instead of actual Nebula. So, there's the fact that Tony nor Steve actually noticed this because why would they look at the world around them? At the final battle with Thanos, Tony confronts Strange and asks him if this is the only timeline they win. Strange tells him he can't tell him or it won't happen. Tony sees the gauntlet and goes for it, but is outdone by Thanos. Tony realizes he needs to stop Thanos, so he grabs the stones and Thanos snaps. After nothing happens in one final flex, Tony shows him he stole the stones and repeats the line that started it all. I am Iron Man. He snaps, getting rid of the entirety of Thanos' army as well as Thanos himself, at the cost of his own life. Iron Man made the sacrifice play again, and thus we see Iron Man come full circle. In The Politics of Avengers Endgame, Thanos, Iron Man, and the Malthusian Extreme by Matthew Rosa, he explains what makes Iron Man win in the end. The feckless billionaire playboy from the beginning of Iron Man and greedy capitalist in Iron Man 2 eventually became the advocate of reasonable government regulation in Captain America Civil War, and finally, the Christ-like figure willing to die so that the universe can live at the end of Avengers Endgame. This doesn't mean that Iron Man loses his individualistic streak. It is appropriate that, while Thanos' ability to wield the Infinity Stones depends on a gauntlet that he merely acquired, Iron Man's ability to use those same stones to stop Thanos depends on technology that he invented himself. It is Stark's brain, as well as his superior moral character, that saves the day. Tony is dying because of the stones. Pepper knows he's dying and tells him to rest. He finally listens as his suit goes dark, and he rests after 11 long years. Well, 14 if you count the 5 years later thing, because he dies in 2023. They have a funeral for him, and not Black Widow, but I already talked about the women being screwed, so let's just talk about Tony before I cry. Tony addresses his daughter. He made a video for Morgan in true Tony fashion, using technology to give messages to those left behind. They have a funeral, and as far as funerals go, it's really good. It's a full circle thing. Every life Tony touched is there. His family, Happy, the Avengers, Hank Pym, the Guardians, the royal family of Wakanda, Hawkeye's family, the Kid from Iron Man 3, Thunderbolt Ross, Captain Marvel, and of course, Nick Fury. Tony had a really good life, even if he was haunted by his nightmares and issues. I can respect him on a level of being a survivor and in the end doing the right thing to stop the Mad Titan. But that doesn't excuse Ultron or Vision or Happy's injury or Pepper getting extremis or Spider-Man being coerced into helping him or any of the other shitty things he did. In How Iron Man and Captain America Took Marvel from Upstart to Juggernaut by Alex Abad Santos, he explains what makes Stark so likable. Stark's weakness isn't kryptonite or some kind of superhuman ailment, but rather his own arrogance, stubbornness, and selfishness. Watching him work through his own worst traits is relatable, if not aspirational. There's something reassuring about even a multi-billionaire genius not being able to use his money or intellect to cure his own arrogance. It makes him feel a little less powerful and a little more like us. Stark's story, from his very first movie, has been about coming to terms with his father's legacy while also reckoning with his effect on the world. Howard Stark was seen as a visionary world changer and had, throughout his life, worked alongside heroes like Captain America to save the world. And there are lessons we can take from following his story. Tony, don't be an asshole while saving the world, or you'll have to apologize for being a dickface. And we have to acknowledge that without technology, there would be no Iron Man. In the comic book as Symbolic Environment, The Case of Iron Man by John Hagen, he explains, the technology is just as much of a star in Iron Man as the man beneath the armor. It is interesting to note that Stark has no special powers. He is a superhero because he knows how to build things. Iron Man comics have always portrayed technology as constantly evolving. In fact, one of the main appeals of the character is following the change in the suit's appearance as technology improves. Iron Man is one of the few characters in the North American comic book industry whose costume can change on a regular basis without causing a fan outcry. Stark's dilemma brings to mind Postman's 1998 speech, 5 Things We Need to Know About Technological Change. The first item that Postman addresses is the Faustian bargain inherent in technology. Technology giveth, and technology taketh away, Postman notes. A person might use technology for his benefit, but the technology will reap payment for its services eventually. The armor being used to kill and steal is the price that must be paid for Stark's use of the technology for good. Tony is a villain and a hero because of his power over technology. He's a cautionary tale of technology in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yes, technology helps him against his villains, but he also hurts those closest to himself as well. So next time you watch the MCU and think about Tony, remember that he's responsible for a lot of the bad in the universe as well. They just frame it like an accident, but he knew what he was doing. Framing it like that gives all the victims, like Quicksilver and Vision, no agency. Tony is a villain. End of discussion. Can't wait to not read those comments! Sorry in advance to my comment manager and my cats.